Welcome to the Brewers Weekly Rundown Podcast, a production of the Flicksation Podcast Network.
Brewers down to their final out now. Now up to Christian Yelich. Here it is. Yelich sends one to right center and deep. Get up! Get up! Get out of here and gone for Yelich. He has...
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Brewers Weekly Rundown Podcast. We are back as baseball may be back here. Camp is going. So let's get this thing started. My name is Eric Madsen. I'm here at Flicksation Studios in P City, Wisco. What's up, everybody? It is a miserably hot night here in central Wisco. Tonight, Mike Smith with us once again up in Door County. Mike, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back. It's almost time.
Fingers crossed. And we got a new guy with us this evening. The other Will Redmond is with us this evening. Now, I didn't ask you this beforehand. I assume you are not the Will Redmond that plays for the Packers.
That I am not. I am definitely not. That's we actually our last names are spelled differently anyway. So, but yeah, definitely not me.
All right. So, welcome to the show, Will. Where are you at these days?
I'm actually living in the Washington D.C. suburbs. I moved out here for work a couple years ago, but I was born in Illinois, but I'm raised in Wisconsin since I was about 3 years old. So, diehard Brewers fan, diehard Milwaukee Bucks fan. I guess football-wise, I picked up the Chiefs from my dad, but I do root for the Packers too. So I'm mainly a Wisconsin sports fan.
All right, we finally got a Bucks fan here on the show, or at least one that sounds like he follows the Bucks. So that is good news. All right, guys. Yeah, we're going to try and get this weekly thing going here now as baseball is sort of getting started. We'll get into a few things tonight. First off, let's talk about where you can contact the show. You can do so via email, brewersrundown@gmail.com. Follow the show on Twitter or Instagram at Brewers Weekly. We have a voicemail line you can call or text anytime. If you do leave a voicemail message, we probably put it on the show unless you tell us otherwise. That's at 608-535-9302. Subscribe to the show on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora. You can catch us on our YouTube channel. There are many ways to download or listen to the Brewers Weekly Rundown podcast. Please subscribe wherever you listen, and if you got a second, please leave us a quick little review and a lofty star rating to help us move up in the standings, so to speak, so we can get more listeners. That would be fantastic of you folks to help us out in that regard. All right, so the way we left this the last time we talked, we had no idea if or when baseball would happen. We were still in the nasty battle between the union and the owners. That came up with no agreement, so Rob Manfred did indeed install a 60-game season, full prorated pay for players. It appears as of right now, anyway, the playoffs will remain the same. Of course, we have a universal DH installed and a couple other safety, quote-unquote, rules applied to the 2020 season, as well as the new rule changes that were going to go into effect anyway. So we'll get into that a little bit into the show. So I think the way we're going to run this, pretty much, at least for the foreseeable future, is, of course, there is a elephant in the room here as they are playing this season in a pandemic. Will Flanders, Mike, and I have all given our thoughts on that pretty in-depth. At the top of each show, we'll just bring up any pandemic-related stuff that we want to talk about in a quick minute here. And then we'll just pretend the rest of the show as if the season will be played in its entirety. We're not going to keep bringing that up every time we talk about something. So, top of the show, Mike, you still where you at? Where are you exactly? Do you think they'll start at this point and not finish? Do you think it looks like they'll get it through?
Kind of 50-50. I definitely am probably leaning more towards that they'll start and not be able to finish. But I do see some possibility where they don't even start now. There's been a lot of cases popping up, a lot of players getting it, but a lot of them have been asymptomatic. These next 2 weeks will be really telling with where we're at in this as kind of a country, and where we're at with this with Major League Baseball and the players.
I will say I'm in a little bit of the middle. I believe they will start the season. I believe that from the get-go. As long as they could come to an agreement, they would start the season. But I'm a big believer that they will not finish the season just because, well, obviously right now there's been a lot of cases popping up, but playing in home ballparks, not having a bubble like, the NHL or the NBA does, I do not believe they're going to be able to finish because of that. And also there's more players than in hockey or basketball. So I just think that, especially like the teams out west, when they play each other, the LA teams have to travel to San Francisco all the time, and San Francisco has to go to Arizona, and et cetera. I think we're going to have many cases popping up. Same with the Florida teams. I just think eventually it's going to get shut down because there's going to be a bunch of teams that have too many cases.
Yep. I think realistically that's probably the case. I'm going to just blindly hope that they can get through this thing. Yeah, that's where we're at as far as the pandemic itself goes. I'll kind of round that out by saying the first round of initial testing, although hung up a lot longer than they had expected, is in. They did give 3,740 tests overall to MLB staff and players. 98.2% of those tests came back negative, but there were 66 positives. 58 of those players and 8 of those staff. For the Brewers, only 2 testing positive. Luis Urias coming up positive and Angel Perdermo. So that's where the Brewers are at as of right now. We would expect those 2 guys to probably join the team at some point.
To clarify, Eric, I thought that their tests were earlier in spring because they reported and they tested negative by the time they reported on the 1st. So it's my understanding that they're clean on that now and that their tests were during the shutdown or the lockdown.
The positive tests were during the lockdown? You're saying?
I believe that too. I believe
okay.
that was the case also. That's what I heard.
Well, it was kind of shut down or after they'd closed the spring training at some point, but
Okay.
Council stated that no one tested positive or there were no positive cases or anything on July 1st. And that report was kind of a little bit misleading because they'd used the verb tested and then tests, whereas past tense or not. But yeah, it was definitely, I don't believe they're infected as of now, and they weren't on the July 1st either.
Okay, fantastic. I guess I didn't look into that far enough, but that is good news. So
I would like to add one more thing, just to say I also don't like how the MLB has not been consistent with these tests. I saw Chris Bryant was pretty upset and stuff about getting tested, every few days as opposed to every day. So that's another issue going forward. But I do hope we get through the season, at least for what we have.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's move into the meat of the episode here, guys. So the rosters, what we have now is the 45-man list that has been invited to Spring Training 2.0 or whatever we're going to go ahead calling this. They will eventually have a active roster, so to speak, of 60 players, a taxi squad, as we're calling it, that will reside in Appleton at the Timber Rattlers Stadium. It is thought that most of the top-tier draft picks, and they did manage to sign Garrett Mitchell here in the last couple of days, their first-round pick will probably reside on the taxi squad, as there is no minor leagues right now and pretty much no other way to develop these guys. So who knows what we're going to see from camp, or if we'll see anything from the taxi squad specifically. So I'll be interested to see what goes on up there. As far as the 45-man roster, guys, I don't think there's any surprises there. I'm glad to see Logan Morrison back here, although that's probably a no-brainer at this point, and there's probably room for him as well. And we'll get into a couple things Council said specifically about the 30-man roster, which will start the season. It's going to be an interesting year because Council used to the end of the season being a much larger roster, and this year it kind of goes backwards. He starts with the bigger roster at the beginning, and it gets shaved off as we go along. So Mike, any surprises or notes from the 45-man camp crew here?
I wouldn't say in particular. I know Taylor already got sent down to the Timber Rattlers, so he doesn't look like he'd probably have a chance to start the season with the team if that's the case. I know we were talking about before he was injured, but most of our injuries have cleared up too, so it almost makes making the roster a little more competitive, but there's a couple more spots out of the get-go. But Miller and Morrison, have to be almost clicks at this point to make the at least the initial 30-man roster to start with. But we kind of have like a pool of 60 players of these 45, and I think they have to pay everybody on the 40-man roster whether they use them or not. I think with the relievers it makes it the most interesting, because now if you start a season and Hader and Knebel are both healthy, and then we also had someone in the starting rotation, one of the new guys also was injured to potentially start the year now. We actually have everybody healthy, and with Urias too, now he's had time to heal. Maybe there's a question mark with someone, I don't know, I guess having a job in the bullpen that maybe would have had one before if Morrison and Miller are sure things. But no other surprises really.
Honestly, I mean, I think Mike pretty much summed it up pretty well there. I do think Logan Morrison should make the roster, and I did hear about Tyrone Taylor being shipped down. As far as the rest of the roster goes, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, at least for the most part. I don't know exactly who they're going to cut, but it just depends on how the rest of spring training goes. I think that the bullpen has a chance to be very deep. I know there was non-roster invitees like Justin Grimm and Shelby Miller that were invited, so I feel like they have a chance to still make the roster. So we'll see how things play out. But with the roster being put up to 30, I think Logan Morrison for sure makes it now. And then we'll see exactly what, I guess, Stearns and Council decide to do.
Yeah. What's interesting is some of the things Council said at some of the preseason presser right before the reboot camp started. He did say he specifically expected to have, so we're starting with a 30-man roster here at the MLB level. He says he expects to have more pitchers than position players. If you got a 30-man roster, that means at least 16 of those will be pitchers. If there's more pitchers, could be more than that. He's normally starting the season, at least under the new rules, with a maximum of 13 pitchers, and we're going to have at least 16 pitchers here on the roster, if you go by what Council says. And I think specifically Knebel's going to be a very interesting thing here. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's a lock, but so his timetable, he's a little past when a major leaguer after Tommy John surgery would be released to play. But he pretty much missed the entire rehab stint segment of that comeback. So are they just going to throw him out there? Because you expect him to get 3 outs, and this guy throws near 100 miles per hour, so he's not... I mean, where do you get work for this guy? In camp, if they don't think something's right, very low probability that he'll start the year in Appleton. But if he's not looking 100% or close to it out there, I mean, I guess with 16 pitchers, there's a little room for that. But you got to get him work somewhere. And at this level, that's just gameplay. So I'm curious, Mike, what you think.
I've heard from most of the things that health-wise he's there, but you also want more pitchers because I feel like they need a little more work early on.
Yeah.
But with that, I think like if you look at the 16 and you're going to trust Council on that, and I don't see any reason why he would say that and not mean it or be close to it. Those pitchers that we had that were kind of the outliers, like are they a 6 or 7 or 8 in the rotation kind of guy, and then like a Suitor, well, you can have those guys all make the team, and then kind of find places for them. And if the Brewers wanted in a season like this, they could legit use a 6 or 7 man rotation if they wanted, or they could have guys pitch 3 innings and use this kind of revolving door. With the Knebel thing, to me, it's going to be interesting to see where he is to start the year. But if he is returned to his former self. It'll be interesting to see if Hader is closing or Knebel is.
I mean, I like Hader not as a closer, but I almost feel like he's just kind of been stuck there at this point.
Personally, I think he's going to be. I think he's been getting a lot of work in. There hasn't really been a lot of reports about it, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be ready. And as far as the rest of spring training goes, I think that they're going to be able to get him ready to go to resume being back into the closer's role. And I much prefer him to be the closer than Hader, just because I still don't trust Hader's slider, and he's also a lefty. There's some about being a lefty. Obviously, there's a lot more right-handed hitters, so I think it's better to have a right-handed closer. And Knebel has that, knee-buckling curveball. So I prefer Knebel to be the closer, and I think he's going to be. We'll just have to wait and see. But I think things are pointing in the right direction for him to be the closer again.
Yeah, some other good news, especially on the pitching front here, that Council brought up. He says the pitchers have all been working and are all pretty much ready to go at this point. I specifically said that Woodruff and Lindblom have been at that Kenosha's hitting academy for the last 30 days or so, pitching to live batters. Not slouches, apparently. Gavin Lux and Garrett Mitchell are both at that hitting academy right now. So these guys have been pitching to those guys. Council says they're both up to 90 pitches already. So, I mean, hundreds about the max you're going to see from anybody on the Brewers these days. So it's good to hear at least those two guys are ready to go. Apparently the coaches and the pitchers have been keeping on their shit here. So
I'm fairly still optimistic. I mean, a season like this potentially can be anybody's, but if you look at kind of the suggested, or not the suggested, but the predicted rankings, and me and you talked about this off air earlier. I mean, the top 4 teams, they have them different. They've changed a little bit since they released the schedule and whatnot, but I mean, most of them are the top 4 teams. Like the best team is 3 above 500, 33 wins, and the 4th one is about at 500. I've seen us be the 4th one on the one you shared, but you're talking about playing a 60-game season, and a hot start could definitely
mean everything.
Make all the difference right out of the gate. But with that, a bad start is a big deal. But having the depth we have with the pitchers, and then having all the depth we have with our position players, it's pretty beneficial. And I think guys will get playing time too. And then with the rosters getting cut down gradually like that, it's kind of do or die for some of these guys out of the gate. But Arcia, Urias are going to have some battles for playing time, and then we still have Holt. So I am still pretty high on at least the ceiling for this team in a season like this. But we'll have to see. But yeah, I feel a lot better about the pitching than in a normal situation season for sure with what we had.
Kind of on the same page as Mike. Just with the pitching. I was not a huge fan of the rotation going into the season. So I thought, in a normal season, the bullpen was going to get very taxed, just based off the rotation options. I mean, there was Woodruff, and then we haven't really seen, Lindblom pitch yet. So he could be a diamond in the rough, but we just kind of have to wait and see. And then the rest of the rotation is just kind of, to me, a bunch of 4s and 5s. So I was not a huge fan of the rotation going into this year. And then in terms of the rest of the roster, lots of, veteran leadership and veteran experience, as well as just major league experience in general by the pitching staff and the rest of the position players. But yeah, I mean, I am optimistic because of the shortened season that Council can, use this bullpen effectively and have a plethora of pitchers available to use to his disposal. So just with that, it's going to put less stress on the rotation. And, even if Woodruff, somebody like Woodruff is able to give him, 6-7 innings, a start or two, that's going to help immensely. So, and I like the veterans we have. I like Jed Jerko. I like, Justin Smoke's a, decent player. So I think we're in a good spot.
All right. So, yeah, last week, Friday, they released the schedules. It appears the Brewers will open at Wrigley Field against the Cubs on the road, and then they will head to Pittsburgh, which, of course, is the outlier here in the Central Division, before coming home and having 3 against the St. Louis Cardinals at Miller Park. So they did this kind of, they called it a travel thing, but they did this kind of unbalanced system here where specifically with the Cubs, the Brewers only play 3 games against the Cubs at Miller Park, whereas they'll play 7 against the Cubs at Wrigley Field. Once again, we're playing each of the divisional opponents 10 times, and there's some weird mix that I haven't really counted up with the American League Central teams. I see that we play the Twins 6 times, a couple of the other teams 4 times. I'm not entirely sure how that all broke down, but looking at the schedule, Will, what were your initial thoughts?
It was interesting to see how the Brewers only play like the Cubs at home, I think 3 times, and they play them on the road 7 times and other stuff. But obviously, I mean, it's each team plays the same opponents, so I don't really think home versus away with no fans is really going to play a factor. The main thing I've heard is that teams are used to playing in their own ballparks, but I don't think. I mean, the Brewers won Game 163 at Wrigley, a year or 2 ago, and I personally don't think it really matters that much. I think it's just baseball, and the better team will win, in the end. So I think, it's not really that big a deal as to home versus road, especially with no fans in the stands.
Yeah, I have to keep reminding myself of that because I feel like you get jobbed and then, wait, I guess there's no fans. So what does it matter? Who knows? Maybe your cardboard cutout sitting in the euchre seats, Mike, makes all the difference. Only $50, by the way. The KBO was doing that where you could do it for $20 a seat, and then the euchre seats, which cost you $1 to actually sit in.
I love the euchre seats. They're
$50.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I used to, when I was still living there, when I was home for college summers, every summer I'd go and try to get in line for those euchre seats. And then I'd probably end up, moving down a little bit if there wasn't, a packed stadium. But
I always wondered how tough it was to get into those.
I don't think it's really that tough if you just.
Okay.
But anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. Cheap, so you'd think people want to try it once. I don't know. Yeah, I guess you tried it once and kept going back, so it couldn't have been that bad. But
no, but people do sit in line, and sometimes the line depends on the bobblehead days.
Oh,
the line can get pretty long, but they only have 100. I think it's like 100 seats. So if there's usually there's a pole outside the stadium that usually you can mark that's about 100 people single file, and so then it's just not worth waiting anymore and seeing.
Fair enough.
They only allow you to buy 1 seat too. You can't buy 5 for 5 people. So I was able to do it one time where I was supposed to go to the game with somebody, and I got a $1 seat. Was able to get back in line and got them a seat. So that was kind of interesting. But
nice.
Anyway,
Mike, thoughts on the schedule?
Yeah, I'm probably more in the same boat as Will on some of these divisional opponents. Like it's a weird situation where we've actually done better against them on the road. I feel like the Cardinals are like that. I kind of feel the Cubs are like that. And then like Braun in particular absolutely bashes in Cincinnati. I was more, I guess, triggered or put off that, we are unbalanced where we play them in Milwaukee way more, because I think that is to our disadvantage far more than playing in Wrigley. But, the other part is Pittsburgh early there. They could be that one that snake bites another team right out of the gate or whatever else. They need to take care of work early, and we need to not get swept. But, we're playing about everyone at the same time. I think the Royals, we only play 2 times maybe, or that's one of the teams we play less, and it would be you'd hope that would be one of the ones you'd play more in the American League, but that wasn't the case either. But at the end of the day, they're mostly 3 and 4 game series, but there's not a lot of travel time in between. But at least we don't have to travel as great a distances as some of the other teams. But it'll be interesting without fans for sure.
Yeah, and I believe we had one 16 or 17 game stretch that was our worst, at least at longest stretch without a day off. Some teams had 20s, so at least we didn't get that. But I did look; it was a pretty tough stretch of games too we were into. But yeah, everybody's pretty much in the same boat here. Stearns put it at the presser the other day. It's pretty much you wake up on the end of July and the entire division is still tied for first. And you just kind of go from there. So should be interesting. And then with the rule changes here, guys, of course, we got the universal DH for this season only as of right now. I'm pretty sure we're not going back to pitchers hitting for one season, but that's discussion for another episode, I guess. We got the runner on second in the 10th inning and beyond to try and speed up some of these extra inning games. Of course, we have the rules that we're going to go into effect anyway, the 3-batter minimum, and some of that other stuff. I don't know how much we're going to see position players pitching and whatnot this season with the extra guys on the roster or whatnot. But I was listening to actually watching baseball tonight the other day, and there are minor leagues that do the runner on second in the 10th inning bit all the time, specific leagues or divisions or whatever. And apparently it's mostly policy in those situations for the first guy that bats just to bunt him over. And so you can try and score him from third with just about anything. So that'll be interesting. I don't know if the MLB will play it that way as much. I mean, I'm sure you're not going to have Christian Yelich up there bunting if he's the first guy to bat, but Counsell always kind of been known as a guy that doesn't like bunting for the most part anyway. So I think the rumor has it that I've heard from insiders talking in interviews and stuff that they are specifically going to probably use Keon Broxton as that guy that starts at second base when and if that happens. But again, who knows? Yeah, some of the interesting things here. We can talk about the DH specifically, and do you think, Will, that helps or hurts the Brewers in this situation? I think most people assume Braun will get most of the reps at DH this year, but I don't know. We'll see. So do you think that helps the Brewers, DH?
I think it helps for sure. I think it helps a lot of teams, but I definitely think it helps the Brewers in terms of their health because they can put Braun there. We do have quite a log jam in the outfield, a lot of guys that can play a lot of days, and that's been one thing I have been not happy with Counsell in the past is he keeps inserting guys in and out of the lineup where there can't really be a lot of consistency. So having the DH and having Braun be able to take most of those DH at bats helps that, especially with him being older. Some of the other rules I'm not very high on. I extremely dislike the runner at second base rule. I just think you're ruining the game. But again, Manfred to me has been a very terrible commissioner. So regardless, it is what it is for this year. I hope it's not this way going forward. But yeah, I don't like this. I don't like any of the 3-batter minimum rule. I don't like the runner at second base rule in the extra innings. If you're going to do that in the extra innings, I would prefer to have it further in the game. So maybe like the 15th inning, if it gets that far, you can start doing that. But I just think you're ruining the game in that aspect. So, but yeah, in terms of the DH rule, I like it a lot for the Brewers' sake.
I don't like the second base thing either, but I get it for this season. It is actually in the safety protocol section, so it's kind of in the 100-page safety thing, just to try and alleviate some of the stuff on pitchers. I guess I also read that will be the runner on second will be scored as an error, so it will not be an earned run against any pitcher. Of course, the pitcher would still probably get the loss if that guy scores, but stats this year, who knows? But Mike, what do you think of the rules here in the DH thing?
I personally think the DH helps us, but some articles I've read and some stuff around baseball, because our pitchers were so good against other pitchers in the NL, they kind of questioned if it would actually hurt us, but I don't see how it doesn't. And as Will talked about the outfield log jam, and it also, maybe Braun doesn't even have to play at first now. Does this solve that problem? Does that, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. And then you talked about Broxton too, like before, maybe he probably doesn't make the team, but you need that speedster guy. And now your outfield, you can bulk up a little more on defense or whatever. And if, Taylor's out of the equation, then you probably have the idea there that Broxton's going to be the guy. If you're playing a 60-game season, though, I don't understand the runner at second either. Like, you're trying to speed up a game and you're only playing 60 games. I feel like every pitch and every at bat is more meaningful and the pressure is higher, like, and you're just gonna, oh well, you battled for 9 innings now. Let's put him here on second base and see if you can score real quickly, and then you're gonna try to bunt him over or this or that. Like I don't know about that, but I think that's gonna affect the strategy and stuff earlier in the game. Council might do some more pitching changes. He might do some double switches to get batters and defense in there. Maybe you try to put an extra run or two on the board, or you really go for the jugular in certain situations, just so you don't get a situation where you have a tie game going late, or you have an extra padding where if your bullpen melts down a little bit, as long as it doesn't get to a tie game, you're not going to that kind of coin toss situation. So I think it'll benefit us, but some of the experts don't agree with that. I think it gives more playing time to all these other guys, and since we have so much depth, if one guy's not doing it, like, we can just put in another. It definitely gives us some clout there.
We also don't really have like a speedster per se, like some other teams do. I know the Cubs had that Gore guy. I don't know if they still do, but we don't really have an ultra speedster that could just steal base. We used to have like Carlos Gomez and stuff, but I don't think we really have that anymore. So I don't know who you would have as your runner at second, but I guess it's interesting.
I think the fastest guy on the team is Yelich at this point, right? And he's certainly not going to be the guy at second. So
probably not.
All right. So, and we also have the interesting thing. I mean, my gut tells me not much will go on, but we have an August 31st trade deadline. So will teams be willing to, buy guys? I think the buyers will be there, but I just don't think, unless you've had a really terrible month, anybody's far enough out of it to really start selling the shop. And I mean, if they are, I think the Brewers, even if the Brewers start out really cold and just don't have it, I think the Brewers have a bunch of guys that are ripe for trading with the 1-year contracts with all the club options. I think they've got a lot of things they can offer, but again, that depends on who you want, who's out of it, who's not. I don't know. I personally don't see much happening at this trade deadline, but what do you guys think?
I'll go first. I don't see a whole lot happening in this trade deadline either. I think the Brewers, again, just for their, they usually start off hot. That's been their history, is they start off hot and then get, colder as the season goes along and then maybe recover at the end. So that's good that the season is shorter in that case. I just don't. We could have a guy hitting 400 this year just because of the 60-game season. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen. It's not enough time to really, assess everybody fairly to like what they actually are. Like, there's been plenty of guys. I know Aramis Ramirez, when he played for the Brewers and even the Cubs, was a guy that would start off very slow and then get hotter as the season went along. But when only 60 games, I mean, it's very tough to analyze that stuff. So I don't think there's going to be much activity. It probably will be just a few small moves, if anything. That's my opinion.
I might disagree on this one a little bit. I mean, I feel like there's going to be a couple teams that are going to have either injuries, maybe COVID cases, or someone just has a really bad start. Someone starts 2-10, they finish a month 10 below 500, and I mean, they're still, they're paying them basically by the game at this point now. So yeah, I mean, some of those owners might want to save that money if they know for sure they're out of the playoffs. And then, the flip side of that is, I think, if a team is like that, or maybe, they don't take winning the series in this type of situation maybe as seriously, or maybe their plans for the team revolve more around next year and the year after, that maybe you make some moves of guys that have a couple years left on their contract or something, where even if there, isn't baseball next season because of a strike or some other situation, where you make some moves that are looking farther down the road. So I think that approach and that angle will be really interesting too. And I mean, maybe, with basically a pool of 60 guys, and then you have, the 45 guys, and then you have the roster at 30, down to 28, 26, as you keep on going there. If look at all of our 1-year contracts. Like if we have some guy that like is hitting 100 and trading them is almost the same as cutting them at that point. But another team could pick them up on the waiver wire. But any way not to pay him, or if you have 3 third basemen and 2 of them don't work out, well, you can get them. It'll be interesting. That I think there'll be some moves for sure.
Yeah, everything about this season is going to fascinate the hell out of me. So, yeah, looking forward to it for sure, and all the what the hells that will come with it. All right, so before we wrap up, guys, with all these things going on, assuming we have a full season, where do you see the Brewers realistically landing on this one? For me, I think I'd be surprised if they couldn't win 40 games. But who knows? I have trouble pushing them past that. I hope I'm wrong, but where will they fall? I don't know. I'll say third at 40 and 20, I guess, is going to be my prediction.
That seems pretty optimistic for a lot of the predictions. A lot of them had the best team at 33 wins. They had, I don't know, maybe, I don't think anyone's going to get above 35 wins, but I could see us taking first or second. It's too tough to say at this point. I think it really depends on our start, but as Will talked about, if you're going to go off our history of fast starts, I think this plays into our favor. And then with the depths, I'll say 34 wins, and that is either going to be good enough for a wild card or maybe division.
I've been stuck on this one for a little while, but if you analyze it from afar and just so 40 and 20, what you said, if you just extrapolate that out, that means that we'd probably win about 100 games in a typical season, and I think that's a little too high for this team. I do think we have a good team, but I think more in the ballpark of somewhere between. I don't think the Brewers are gonna go 500. I think they'll go a little bit higher than that. I just don't know if it's going to be extremely high. Anywhere between 32 wins, so 32 and 28, to about 38 wins is where I see them. So I guess in that way, I'll settle for 35. So 35 and 25 would be my record for them. And I think that's going to be good enough to get them a wild card spot. Will it be good enough to win them the division? I mean, we'll have to wait and see. Definitely ahead of the Pirates, and to me, going to be fighting with the other 3 teams in the division for the division title. So I don't know exactly who the best team. It's very even. In 60 games, anything can happen. So definitely those 4 teams are going to be going at it, and I think the Brewers can easily win the division just with the shortened season.
All right, so yeah, that's about what we have for this evening. Dr. Will Flanders and I will be back in a few days here. We got some other things to discuss. We're going to dip into the pitching specifically and probably the draft. We want to talk about who's going to get that 5th rotation slot, or are we going to have a 5th rotation slot that's kind of solid? Are we just going to run a 4-man? Are they going to rotate around the 5th man? Who knows? And we want to talk about whether or not I think it's very likely this year that a reliever wins the Cy Young Award. You got to make a hell of an impression as a starter when you're only going to get maybe 10 games if you're lucky. Who usually shines more in a abbreviated season? Probably a reliever. I think it's very likely a reliever wins the Cy Young. Hater Cy Young guys for this year. But Will and I are going to talk about that on the next show, and we'll see what else comes up between now and then. Once again, email us at brewersrundown at gmail.com, at Brewers Weekly on Twitter and Instagram, or follow us on Facebook. And the phone number, call or text at 608-535-9302. Thanks, everybody. Once again, my name is Eric. You can find me on a number of other podcasts on this network, talking movies, TV, and all kinds of other things. Flicksation.com. Mike, thanks for coming back again. We're going to kind of jump around on panels now, but you'll be along for most of it. So, Mike, thanks once again for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Getting excited to start the season. Fingers crossed, and it's days are getting closer and closer now.
And Will, thanks for joining us. Let's do it again, shall we?
For sure. I enjoyed this. I like always talking about sports and debating anything, or just discussing in general. So very much willing to do it again.
It's nice to actually have baseball to talk about now, as opposed to all the other ugly things we've been talking about on this show. Will, anything, Twitter handle or anything where folks can get a hold of you if they'd like?
I used to have a Twitter account. I deleted it a while ago. So
all
this
right.
is several years. So I don't really have anything besides Facebook and Snapchat. So
all right. So email us if you have anything to say to Will, and we'll get that over to Will. So once again, thanks guys for joining us. Tune in a couple of days here. Try and get at least one show a week, maybe more here in the coming times as baseball gets going here once again. But Dr. Will Flanders and I will be back in a few days to talk pitching and some other stuff. So thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you next time. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the Brewers Weekly Rundown. It is a 2020 production of the Flicksation Podcast Network. We will see you next time.